Is the news biased?
Unbiased news.
Unbiased news.
We just have so much biased news every day.
Of course the news is biased.
Differentiate between opinion and fact.
We need more objective reporting overall across the board.
If you are overwhelmed with fear about getting some of this biased, impure news, there are services that will tell you what news is biased or unbiased. And there are outlets that claim to not be biased at all.
Do you think the news is biased?
Yeah. Especially it depends like what network you're on. I think like left wing, right wing.
24-hour news network should be illegal. And they are biased.
Okay.
Both sides.
I think they should just state facts. Exactly, thank you.
Fact-based news outlets, I think we can call them.
Mainstream, fact-based news.
Responsible, fact-based news.
Fact-based news organization.
I mean, yeah, just the facts. Why would you want anything else? But you know, it's funny. People are obviously quite aware that the news is biased, but not always so imaginative as to how.
Where do you guys get your news?
It's kind of sad, but I get a lot of my news from social media.
I normally get my news from, I don't get a lot of news. I don't believe in it.
Don't believe. I am fascinated by this. Don't believe in the news.
No. Too much spin.
There is a general notion that bias occurs when a position on the political spectrum is apparent, which is why if someone has to come up with examples of biased news, they might immediately point to Fox or MSNBC. But people tend to overlook many key ways media can exhibit bias. And so to explore this, I asked people to compare a handful of headlines.
He has no shirt on. That is psychotic.
UN rejects resolution calling for immediate ceasefire in Gaza. US blocks resolution calling for immediate ceasefire in Gaza. So rejects versus blocks.
Rejects versus blocks.
Because blocks and rejects means the same thing.
Right. Rejects is like, we're not going to do that. Blocks is like, we're stopping it.
And UN versus US.
I think this more comes down to your inherent feelings about the UN versus your inherent feelings about the US.
Maybe like lots of different nations rejected this thing, but US blocks is like, no, it was America.
Like the whole world doesn't want to come to peace or compromise. Where this one makes it seem like it's just the US that doesn't want to compromise.
I think you could look at this in the headline. People will post the headline and say, like, they don't want a ceasefire, but the context is they don't want a ceasefire given the terms of the agreement. This makes it feel more anti-peace from either the UN or the US perspective.
What about the added context that the vast majority of UN nations supported the resolution?
Yeah.
I see. Okay, yeah, that makes a big difference. When most of them wanted to.
You're right. They both leave out very important detail, which 10 votes against and 145 in favor, right?
Do you not like the idea that you are being tempted to click on something?
I don't like that at all.
Like if you're crafting a headline because you have a constituent of readers that largely agree with your ideas, then people probably like the idea of being, incentivized to click on a headline that confirm their view.
The headlines I was asking people to compare were both from Fox News. And the reason headlines are so important is because more than half of people only read the headlines. But clearly, two factual headlines can take you in two different directions, which is why just the facts is, let's say, a bit naive. Deadly airstrike hits area of Gaza that many have fled to. And historian Asal Rad on Twitter offers this edit. Deadly Israeli airstrike hits area of Gaza that Israel told Palestinians to move to.
Do you feel like one is more accurate, one's less biased?
The second one's more biased.
Yeah. The second one's more biased.
Yeah.
The second one is trying to convince you that Israel is killing people intentionally. The first one is more a statement of fact.
Yeah, so I mean here you can easily see that in the second statement they are trying to portray that this was like a very planned move by the Israeli government.
Both are biased because one is like very specifically, obviously implicating Israel, and one is like avoiding the implication of Israel.
So you feel like the second one is just kind of sensational?
For me, this news is about the violence that is being spread in the world. So I don't care if it's Israel spreading the violence or it's the Palestinians spreading the violence. There could be some stages where some Palestinians would have done something bad. And it's not all of Israel doing the airstrike, and it's not all of Palestinians doing something which might offend Israel. It's just a group of people. So it's important that if you want to go into that news, level of detail, then you should be specifying that who is doing this.
Do you think one headline is more appropriate than the other?
Yeah, I think those are important.
So I don't know if they actually did that or not. The second one seems to be having an agenda.
The second one says that Israeli was trying to basically corral people and lead them into a trap and then drop a bomb on them. It's pretty horrific, right? I mean, that's just a mess over there in Gaza. If both are completely correct, the second one's more appropriate.
The fact that Israel told Palestinians to move there.
Is that true?
It is.
Oh.
Well,
I would say that there is some confusion about what constitutes sensationalism. Namely, the difference between a needlessly graphic headline versus a set of facts that just happen to be kind of shocking. But the question of who gets sensational or graphic versus neutral headlines is where a lot of bias comes in. This from The Intercept: between the LA Times, New York Times, and Washington Post, the term slaughter was applied to Israelis versus Palestinians 60-1. Horrific, 38-4. Massacre, 120-4. Also favoring Israelis. Here's one from the New York Times. The article was originally headlined,
"What we know about Tyrie Nichols' lethal encounter with Memphis police." And then they changed it later to "The questions that remain a year after Tyrie Nichols' death."
Do you think they're both representative?
Death. This is actually from the same article.
Those are both pretty neutral, I would say.
Both neutral.
But open-ended, trying to get you to click on it.
They're both relatively passive, though. It's not saying he was killed. It's saying lethal encounter and a death. So both of them are not that aggressive in the headline.
Right. And then
You mean
whatever...
are both of them kind of pretty fair? Not too biased in a way?
Just framing it as a death versus a lethal encounter with police.
You know, they're not trying to throw the police under the bus, but at the same time, there's definitely some questions that need to be answered.
I think that it could say that's what happened.
Yeah, both of them.
I'd say the first one mentions that he was killed by the police, and the second one just says that he died.
Oh, okay.
I think the first headline has stronger wording. It makes you feel something more, get a stronger rise in reaction out of people.
In terms of the feeling that you get as you're about to read it, totally different.
I would say the questions that remain are probably a little more biased.
the people I spoke with were basically all generally aware that everyone has bias. Obviously, the goal is for accuracy and to convey a story faithfully, but to get rid of bias, for the most part, not entirely possible. However, a few people I spoke with did seem to be quite sensitive to the idea that a certain headline might be attempting to seduce them into clicking by eliciting emotion, or that a certain headline was sensational. But what certain people think they're looking for is actually the aesthetic of neutrality, I would say. Because writing a headline about a crime, but leaving out the perpetrator of the crime, is not to achieve neutrality. And if a piece of news has an emotional impact, that doesn't preclude objectivity. Sometimes a story is just shocking, and if a story is shocking, there is no reason to neuter the details, so to produce an emotionless headline. But that being said, I am biased. And that will do it for me. My name is Spencer Snyder. If you found this video interesting, make sure you are subscribed to Breaking Points. You can also check out my YouTube channel where I talk all about media and politics, link in the description. Liking and sharing always helps. Thank you to Breaking Points. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.